and welcome to Two Wayward Writers North. I'm Rachel McCarran, talking to you from the northwest coast of England.
And I'm Laura Ricono from the northwest coast of Borneo.
Today, we're going to be discussing the topic of point of view, or POV. We're not going to tell you what it is because I guess you probably already know, but we're going to have a little chat about the things we like or dislike about various points of view and how we've encountered it in the reading we love and the writing we like to do. Laura, do you want to tell us a little bit about which points of view you enjoy reading or writing in?
Actually, I wanted to ask you why you chose this topic today. I think that's a very interesting thing to discuss.
Okay,
why? Why are we doing point of view today?
There's a number of reasons. Firstly, because it's really important as writers to get it right. You know, it sounds like a straightforward subject, but in fact, it's quite easy to mistake it, especially when you're first starting out. The first thing that I brought to Litopia when I was starting out writing, getting critiquing on writing, I thought was pretty sound in close third person. And I hadn't noticed that, not a lot, but in certain areas, I had just slipped into, what people call head hopping. And I'd mistakenly slipped out of Hannah's point of view, the main character, into other points of view. And you don't necessarily notice yourself doing that until somebody reads it. And a reader might not know all the conventions of point of view, but if it's not right, if it slips, if it goes off, they'll notice that something's wrong. So it's an important thing to get right. And once you master it, it's fairly straightforward. You can stay in your lane with your point of view. So that's the first reason. Secondly, I'm actually redrafting a novel at the moment that I initially wrote in close third, and I'm changing it to first person. And that in itself is an interesting experience. And then the other reason is because I've been reading things recently that have made me think about point of view. And maybe I'll come to that a little bit later on.
This is interesting because I don't like writing in third person at all. I've tried it. It's never been much fun, but I love writing in first person. And part of the reason is, for me, in first person, you are so limited to the character's perception and you are inside their bubble. Because I often write aliens, not always, but often. And I might not want to explain everything about the world. And if I was writing third person, I would be tempted to do that. I would start exposition, all this stuff that these days readers don't like so much. But if I'm in first person, I cannot, because the character either doesn't know or doesn't care. And then I can just... It's almost like cheating. It does cause a lot of trouble when your character doesn't want to talk about something, but it allows you to just stay in your lane automatically. And I find that easier, more flowing.
Yeah, I think because you're inhabiting that character, I suppose, is it like method acting, You
Yes.
You just sort of live as that character for the period that you're writing. But I think if it's immersive for the writer, then hopefully it'll be immersive for the reader as well and give a very close experience for the reader. I think that's the intention.
I hope. The thing I'm revising right now is I'm taking my 2 Royal Road books and I'm merging them into one with alternating narrators. And they're both first-person narrators. Both very, very different people. Mm-hmm. With very, very different worldviews, but also settings. So one narrator lives inside the atmosphere of a gas giant, long story, and the other narrator lives on a moon orbiting that gas giant. And so the moon character has knowledge of sci-fi knowledge of ships and warp drive and all this, everything, like what we'd see normal. But the character inside the gas giant has never realized there's a world outside it. So they naturally have different vocabulary and different sentence structures and different ways of talking. And it's been important for me that if you were to open the book at any random chapter, you can tell just by reading whose head you're in. And I hope it works. And we shall see when it comes out.
I think that's a really good approach to take because it's first person, but you've got 2 different points of view. And from your description there, sort of balancing and complementary, giving you two perspectives on the same thing, but two very different perspectives. And I would imagine that is quite an appealing thing to keep things varied for the reader.
When you're moving from third person to first person. So when I'm writing first person, as I said, there's like a boundary, there's a limit of what this character cannot know. And also the character can make mistakes and they'll never know they've made a mistake. So they see another character and think, oh, my uncle is angry, even though he's not, but they think they are. So you have to write, my uncle is angry. So when you're moving from third to first, did you find or are you finding yourself going, oh, she can't know this, or she has the wrong impression of a situation?
Not necessarily in the case of this particular story, because it was originally written in close third with some degree of free indirect discourse. So although it's third person, with free indirect discourse, blends third person narration with interiority of the main character. So even with that third person point of view, you still don't see beyond that character's, beyond their horizons. So it hasn't been that difficult to switch from third to first, because it was already there in some way. And it makes me think, why choose free indirect discourse rather than first person? I don't know if it's a matter of taste or style, but ultimately, as I was redrafting the last time I was redrafting the third person narrative, I just suddenly thought, no, let's just let Sarah, the main character, let's just let her have her voice and say things. And it's liberated the narrative, because she can say things and also reflect on what she says in much more detail. It's probably going to mean that the draft will end up being even longer than it ought to be. But then, that'll all get cut with the editor's scythe when I've put my editor hat on after I've finished the draft. So
when you mentioned free indirect discourse, could you, because I know first person and second person, third person, but free indirect discourse, that's something extra beyond third person, is it?
Yeah, it's not necessarily a point of view in itself, but it's related to close third. So take your main character, and you're talking about that main character in third person, but you're allowing that main character to have their own thoughts, viewpoints, opinions, without having to say, she thought, he wondered, they said, etc. It was very popular in modernist writing, so James Joyce, Virginia Woolf, Kafka, and before that Jane Austen used it loads. Although I have to say, I'm not a Jane Austen fan, so I couldn't actually pluck you an example out of thin air for her. But yeah, it's associated very much with Austen. So classic example would be the opening line of Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, which simply says, Mrs. Dalloway said she would buy the flowers herself, for Lucy had her work cut out for her. So it's that second line, for Lucy had her work cut out for her. That's Mrs. Dalloway's perception. So it's not saying Mrs. Dalloway said she would buy the flowers herself, because Mrs. Dalloway could see that Lucy had her work cut out for her, or she thought Lucy had her work cut out for her. It's just said really simply, as if it's the narrator, but it's Mrs. Dalloway's viewpoint.
Okay, so it's almost like first person, just with different pronouns.
Yes, kind of. Yes. It's a blending of third person narration and that interior thought. I was doing it before I realised what it was, or before I knew there was a name for it. I think possibly because I enjoy reading that kind of writing. So I think that's why I was unwittingly already using it, because it flows quite well.
It does. It seems like I'd enjoy that. And I'm sure I have enjoyed it.
You will have done. And as a reader, you will have read this many times and never known. And that's the point. You're not supposed to know. You don't want a reader of a book to say, I'm enjoying this book because it's using free and direct discourse, or because it's in omniscient point of view. If your reader notices your point of view, it means there's something off about it, I think.
Yes. It's like omniscient point of view, which I love to read, and I've tried writing it. I can't do it, or I can't do it yet. It's really difficult. I know it was more of a thing in in the past than it is now, I think. It's the storyteller approach.
As a reader, I didn't really know the difference between omniscient and close third, although it's obvious. But I didn't notice that when I'm reading stuff. I'm reading omniscient point of view. It just, if it's done well, it just flows. But it's really hard to write, I think.
It is. You need that certain. It's like Terry Pratchett wrote omniscient beautifully. He would forget head hopping. He was in any character's head was free game in any scene. Hop into this head, that head, and then he had his own voice, and he could do that. But you need this very confident, strong, mature voice to even start. So
John Irving does it really well. And I think that's because Irving is, in his own words, he's a Dickens man. So I know Charles Dickens is not as popular as he was, but those stories are still really well told, and mostly in omniscient third person. And you don't feel distanced from it. I think this is the problem. And I think that's probably why it's less popular in modern fiction, because it's not easy for the modern writer, but also it's not as intimate as a close third, or certainly as a first person. And we like to be a bit more immersed and a bit more intimate in our modern fiction, I think. Yeah. You were saying that Pratchett is head hopping. Is it really head hopping, or is it just masterful omniscient?
Well, he would have his focus character in any given book or any given chapter. He'd have one character where he's very deep in their thoughts and what's going on, but he would have absolutely no problem of narrating the thoughts of this character and then narrating the thoughts of the character looking at him. I mean, in a conversation, for example, you would know the thoughts of both characters, and it's not head hopping as such. It's just him telling us what's going on, who's thinking what's happening here, and it works. He sold a few books, I think.
So, yeah, just a few. So you get a real sort of 360-degree view of the whole scene.
Unless for narrative purposes, someone's thoughts had to be concealed, in which case you wouldn't get it. So he would choose,
of course,
when am I going to narrate
withhold
everyone?
And what to show.
Exactly. So that was an important part, and then he'd go off and do a footnote random on the life of the mayfly or something, and it worked.
So Terry Pratchett is a master of omniscience, and it may be head hopping to some degree, but really it's not, because he's just does it so well and it's so smooth. But I've recently read a novel, and this is another reason I wanted to talk about this, where the point of view was quite skewed, and it was noticeable to me. Now, this was the recent novel by Tempest. It's called Having Spent Life Seeking. It's just out this year. And make no mistake, I am not criticizing this novel or not being critical of it, because I loved it and I was really sad when it finished. So if you don't know who Tempest is, he's better known as an award-winning performance poet and recording artist. He's won the Mercury Prize, won lots of prizes for his spoken word stuff and his poetry. He's written 2 novels. One was 10 years ago. One is this one just now. It is in close third, or it should be in close third, because it is very personal about this person's journey in transitioning from female to male, and having been also in prison. It's this person gets out of prison and is trying to adjust to modern life, having been inside for 15 years. So there is a lot of very deep personal emotional stuff going on about identity, about self, and about finding your way in a world where you have missed out on your early adulthood because of being behind bars, from being late teens to 30s, to 30s. So it lends itself very well to close third, but it frequently pops into close third of other characters, and not in separate chapters, but sometimes on the same page. And I don't know why that is. It's not omniscient, but it is, if you like, head hopping. And I don't know if that's that Tempest thought, I'm going to write it the way I want to write it and I don't care, or whether his editor was not brave enough to tell him. Anyway.
Well, The Project Hail Mary, they made a movie recently. That did
Yeah,
something. Okay, so the majority of the book is in first person from Ryland Grace, the astronaut guy. But there's
yeah.
sort of one section in the book where it's suddenly third person, and there's a scene where he is not present, and it's just told third person, and it's a court scene, and you see this court scene, and you don't notice it as you're reading, or I didn't notice it. I was just quite happy. It's a good scene because the character who's in court is hilarious and amazing, and you just like reading about her. And only once it was
Mm.
mentioned after that he said, "Yeah, that was an accident. I didn't mean to do that," but I don't think anyone really cared.
But if it doesn't stop the reader in their tracks, you might think,
No,
that's curious, but you keep
no,
going, then
I was-
it's fine. But if it's accidental, well, surely he must have noticed before he went to press.
it's Andy
Well,
Weir, so he can do what he
how
wants. There's no, I mean, this is why we maybe get, you said you got in the lab and head hopping. We get too caught up on it because it doesn't disrupt the flow. It's a great scene. You
Mm,
would not be able to have this scene from the first person because the first person wasn't actually there. So you would have missed out on a
yeah,
great scene. And you just read through, you don't notice. Editors also would have gone, yeah, we know Andy Weir sells books. Who cares? And just go
yeah,
with it. So, if it works, it works. Who
yeah.
says you're not allowed to suddenly do that? Why not?
I hope you're right, because I have been shifting around with point of view in my redraft of the Forgotten Songs, which I'm redrafting into first, as I said earlier. But I have still got some areas where Sarah intentionally puts herself back into third person. Whether I'll keep it or not, I don't know. But at the moment, particularly when she is feeling stressed or over emotional, she will start to narrate her own life in third person, just for a paragraph or so.
I think that's fine though. That's her. That's part of her character, and that's we might do that sometimes if you're under stress. You might suddenly think of yourself in the third person. That's perfectly valid. Why not? Who makes
Yeah.
these rules?
And I think that's one of the great benefits to writing in first person, as you were saying before about inhabiting the character or getting immersed in that first person point of view. But you can sort of reveal a lot more quirkiness about a character. And yeah, if slipping into third person about yourself is a quirk of your character, then you can do it. That's what I
Yeah,
tell myself anyway.
I think that's fine.
That's what Rachel is telling herself.
Yes, I think. I think she's wise to do so.
I think it might be worth a brief mention about second person, because it's probably least used in fiction, but both you and I have used it for shorter pieces. Your first flash fiction piece was second person, wasn't it?
It was. It was I don't know what it was, but it worked in second person. It got published, so I'm not complaining.
Yeah, so you must have got it right somehow, Laura.
Must have done.
And I've written a short story in second person, although it's kind of first person as well. I think quite often second person does bring in first person if it's a character addressing something to somebody else. But that's also getting published next month in Does It Have Pockets? So I think it works well for short fiction. It's very common in poetry and songwriting. Think of a classic like You're So Vain. We're not going to quote lyrics because we can't for copyright reasons, but there's plenty of songs. You can probably think of some yourself that are in second person, and lots of poems as well. Famous one is If by Kipling is all addressed to you. But I don't know if it works for novels. I did try to read a novel by a writer who I'd read before, and I expected to really love it, but it was in second person, and I was just exhausted by it, so I didn't finish it. I might go back to it, but I didn't finish it. I don't know if you ever read a full novel in second.
Don't think so. I don't remember.
No. I mean, I'm not saying it can't work, and to read, it's quite an intense point of view.
Oh, a book I would like to read on my to be read pile was written in second person, which is N.K. Jemison's The Fifth Season. Has been recommended to me many times, and apparently that's in second person.
Okay. What genre is that?
That is sci-fi, or possibly science
Okay.
fantasy. Sci-fi. Speculative. The genre is speculative.
Okay. Because I was wondering whether certain points of view lend themselves to certain genres. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know whether second person might lend itself more to sci-fi. I don't know whether you remember, Laura, but when I was a teenager, there were books called Choose Your Own Adventure. Did you ever come across these?
I did, yes. I had a couple.
Yeah. And they were all in second person, weren't they? You know, you are entering the dark cave. Do you turn to your left or do you turn to your right? You know, so they only work in second person because it's it's putting the reader as the main character, isn't it?
Yes, and a lot of computer games, the old-fashioned text games would be exactly like that. They'd be like Choose Your Own
Yeah, of
Adventure.
course.
You
Yeah.
have entered a room, you have an onion and a towel. What are you going to do? And you're supposed to eat the onion or something. But yeah.
Or eat the towel if that's an option. That might take you down a
Possibly.
different fork in the path.
Maybe it's time for maybe it's
So
time for resurgence. You know, with all the what's it? The gamer literature. Oh, that's it. Lit RPG. Maybe it's time for resurgence of second person.
is a lot of lit RPG in second person? I don't know.
Not
I
at
know
all,
nothing
but
about it really.
if someone were
Yeah.
to write a more literary lit RPG, I'm sure it would need to be in second person.
Mhm.
Oh, that could be fun.
I was going to say, are you throwing down your own gauntlet there, Laura?
My floor is littered with gauntlets, thank you.
So I think the conclusion I would come to is that your choice of point of view, it matters, but it doesn't matter at the same time. So it matters that it's right for whatever you're writing. And I think perhaps the point of view chooses you and will be decided by what you start to write, maybe.
I think I could, at the moment, I could only write in first. I've settled into
Really?
first. Well, at the moment, I'm not saying
Okay.
it couldn't change, but I have currently.
Okay.
I counted them recently, and we had to add Derek. I had to add Derek. Remember the Book of Derek? I had to add him. So
Yes, yeah.
I have 7 active voices that I could write. I can write in right now, and they all inhabit my
Okay.
head, and I could, I just slot one in and start writing, and it's their voice and it's that character. But I couldn't do that with any other point of view. It only works in first because they're like talking to me.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So what about you? Forgotten Songs of Sarah Sullivan. How is it doing now that you're in first? Are you happy with it?
I am. There was a time partway through when I thought, no, this, why am I doing this? There was nothing wrong with it to start with. But then you push on, and I do believe that it's better for this kind of story. And I think part of the reason I think it's better is that this originally was based very loosely on my own experiences as a student nurse in the 90s. And I felt that I had to write it in third to distance myself from it because I didn't want it to be autobiographical. I wanted it loosely based around my experiences, but I didn't want it to actually be autobiography. But then the more I wrote it and rewrote it, the more distance I got from it. And strangely enough, the more that Sarah became her own character and less about me, then that's when it felt right to write it in first. Does that make sense?
Does make sense, yeah.
And now that she is not me, I can be her.
Yes. Do you find her doing things that you don't agree with? And like you say, you want to do this for the plot, but she ends up doing something else.
Yeah, and she thinks in slightly different ways than I do. But of course, the past is another country, and maybe I was more like that 30 years ago. I don't know. Memories get skewed by time, but also when you're writing about things, you forget what's facts and what is fiction, honestly, and it doesn't matter because it was a very long time ago. But yeah, she's an exaggeration of myself, I think. She does all kinds of things I would never have dared to do.
That's fun.
And her opinions are stronger than mine ever were.
That's also fun.
Yeah. So I am enjoying it, and I think it's working. I am more than halfway through. It is too vast. It is too big. There will have to be some serious hacking away at it in the long run. And it's good as well because my first novel, Songs for Beginners, was written in close third, which is still inhabiting character, but it's just a little bit different. And it was a close third with free and direct discourse, and I really enjoyed that. And I will probably write like that again at some point. But this particular story, I feel more comfortable now, although it was very uncomfortable at first. But now I'm comfortable in first person.
Really uncomfortable?
Yeah, I think maybe, I don't know, maybe it's in my nature to be more of an observer, an outsider, rather than getting in the scene. Yes, I'm a voyeur rather than a participant.
Yes, same.
The other thing about rewriting in first is that you have the luxury of being an unreliable narrator. So you can let your narrator, your main character, express all kinds of views that you don't necessarily share, and they can also be mistaken about what is happening. And in the draft I'm writing at the moment, Sarah often is a bit clueless as to what's going on, which therefore, if your reader is with your narrator, they will also be misled as to what's going on until it is gradually revealed in the end. So that's a good sort of narrative technique to keep your reader a little bit perplexed.
That's all we got time for today. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. To join the discussion, find us on litopia.com.
And don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell your friends. We'll be back soon with more conversation on the wayward side of writing.
See, my trouble right now has nothing to do with point of view.